Which model is best for Amazon FBA? This is the most commonly asked question in the Amazon space. Now, being someone who's tried most methods and is currently generating around 15k profit per month from Amazon, in this video I'm going to be breaking that question down and answering in full detail. So first things first, I'm going to explain what each model is and how they work. Now, the main three models we have is arbitrage, wholesale and private label. I should mention that there are a few subcategories, if you would, such as Amazon to Amazon, unique bundles, but to keep things simple, we'll cover those in another video. So starting with private label. Now, this is essentially working with manufacturers, usually in China, and this may be done through sites such as Alibaba, AliExpress for example. You'll be using these manufacturers to create your own branding for your product. For this model, you want to be targeting low competition but high demand product niches. Now, this can be difficult to find, but with the help of Jungle Scout or Helium 10, tools like that, it can be made easier. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to be creating your own brand, which means you need a unique brand name, you need a logo, and unique packaging so that you can stand out and differentiate from your competition. Once you've worked with the manufacturers and got a plan of what kind of products you want to be producing, what your ideas for the branding and packaging are, then you're going to be purchasing this inventory and having it sent to Amazon's fulfillment centers. But before we can do that, we need to be creating optimized listings using high quality images, high ranking SEO titles and descriptions, and just overall a compelling listing that's going to attract customers and rank well on Amazon's marketplace. So once all of this has been completed and you've purchased your products, they will arrive at you. You'll need to label them, package them up, send them off to Amazon in a big box, and then once they arrive at Amazon, they'll store your items for you, and whenever you make a sale, they'll ship them off to your customers directly, which of course saves you from going to the post office every day. Now, this is what fulfillment by Amazon is. Obviously, this is going to be the same process throughout all three methods, because FBA or fulfillment by Amazon is the actual business model itself. This won't change between arbitrage, private label or wholesale. You do have the option of doing FBM too, but again, that's for another video. Now, once your items are actually sat in Amazon, it's time to get them to sell. But because it's a new brand that you've now created and nobody knows about it, you need to actually be drawing attention to that listing. Now, to do that, you need to market it. And the best way to do this is by using Amazon's PPC ads. This is going to boost the visibility of your brand on Amazon's marketplace. And if everything's done correctly and you've found a product with low competition and high demand, eventually you're going to be boosting those sales. Now, this private label strategy allows you to build a unique brand on Amazon while still leveraging their logistics and massive customer base. So moving on, we have wholesale. Now, wholesale is different to private label because you're not creating your own brand. You're selling branded products that are already performing well on Amazon's marketplace. For example, brands like Dove, right? Most of you watching have already heard of this brand because they've spent millions in advertising their products and getting the face of the brand out to the public. So all we have to do is come along and find a wholesaler, distributor, or contact the brand directly so that we can go about purchasing these products in larger bulk quantities. Now, it is going to depend on the size of the brand on how you go about doing this. To use a Dove example, it is a massive brand, and you've got to think about how many retail stores across the country or even world are already distributing these products and selling them to customers. What difference is your 1, 5, 10, 50,000 order going to make to this brand? Probably not much at all. They have big stores purchasing way more every single week. So for them, it's not even worth the headache to be dealing with little customers who just want to resell your products on Amazon. So in this case, what we need to do is go down the chain a bit and go to their trusted distributors. Now, this is going to be the next best thing to purchasing from the brand. Essentially, they're second on the food chain. They've built up a big trusting relationship with the brand to be able to buy directly from them, and they will then distribute to the wholesalers all around the country or world. Now, for a big brand like Dove, you're a lot more likely to get through to their distributors compared to the brand directly. And if you can, you'll have a slightly higher chance of picking those products up at a profitable cost price compared to if you were to go to a wholesaler who are even lower down on the food chain. Because as I mentioned, the authorized distributor for the brand will be pushing those products down to the wholesalers. Which is your next option? Opening trade accounts with these wholesalers that are all across the country, and if you can work out a profitable cost price, you can then buy in large large quantities from to resell on Amazon. Now at the bottom of the food chain below wholesalers, we have retailers, which takes me on to our next model, which is arbitrage. Now arbitrage is where you're going to these retailers and scanning for products that you can find for a profitable price to resell on Amazon. But for the most part, you're going to be looking in the clearance sections, looking at items that are on sale, because that's where you're going to generate the majority of your margins from. Now this isn't always going to be the case, but for the most part, everyday products that are consistently set at the prices they are and never really go on sale, they're going to be more difficult to actually find profits in, because you're at the bottom of the food chain, you're not buying in larger bulk quantities, so you can't negotiate a discount there, meaning you're probably going to be paying the highest price. However, that's not to say that there's not a lot of potential doing arbitrage even still. So now you know the basics of each method, let's go through them all and discuss the pros and cons of each one, and also which method is most suited to who. So starting with arbitrage. Now there are actually two different types of arbitrage. We have online and in-store or retail arbitrage. Now online arbitrage is where you're going on your laptop and finding products online from retailers all over the country and scanning their online sites to see if you can find products that are going to produce you a profit. Whereas in-store arbitrage is the exact same thing. The only difference is, instead of going online and finding these products, you're physically going into the stores and using an app to scan the barcodes on each of the items to then see if they'll make you a profit selling on Amazon. Even though they're basically the same thing, we're going to split the two models just to give individual pros and cons of each. Now starting with retail arbitrage, the first pro is that you can find some high return on investment products inside the clearance sections. This is because the stores will usually want to clear out those products and are happy to break even on those products or even take a slight loss just to get rid of them. Now this is going to create opportunities for big margins and allow you to find some great return on your money. Another benefit of retail arbitrage is that some of these discounts are going to be limited to specific stores. So what I mean by that is, if you had a Tesco's in Manchester and a Tesco's in Birmingham, the Tesco's in Birmingham may have a discount on one specific product, but the one in Manchester may not have that same discount, which means if you're able to clear the shelves for that product so that no one else is going to be able to purchase it at that discounted price, and it's not available in any other stores across the UK, then the competition for that product is likely going to be pretty low because no one's able to get it as cheap as you are. Now, I must admit there are a lot of cons for retail arbitrage, which is why I don't personally do it anymore. So one, and this is the biggest factor for me, it is very dependent on your location. Now to put this into perspective, I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere, about half an hour from a city, and even that city is fairly small. Now because of this, the shops around here are also fairly small, meaning it can be limiting for the product opportunities you can find inside those stores. And what I've found personally is that these stores around me never really seem to have those big discounts. I mean, the majority of the retail stores near where I live don't even have a clearance section. Whereas if you live near these big cities like London, for example, all of these stores are going to have clearance sections. A lot of them are going to be massive superstores, so there's a wide variety of products and loads of opportunities. But near those smaller cities or towns, that's just not going to be the case, unfortunately. And another thing you got to consider, which ties into the next con for this method, which is the fact that you're going to have to spend money on fuel to get to each store. Now if you do live further away from them good stores like I do, of course this is just going to mean you have to spend even more on fuel. But even living in these big cities, you've still got to travel from each store to the next, and it's going to add up, especially if you drive a car like me that likes to eat fuel as much as a fat person likes to eat cake. Now the third point is it's not very time efficient. Because you've got to travel to each store, you're spending time even just traveling before you've actually reached the store to find those products. And most things you scan aren't going to be profitable, so it's going to take you time to find that first product. And sometimes you may go to a store and find absolutely nothing. Now you've got to take into consideration the amount of time you spent to get there and scan everything inside the store, and still came out empty-handed. Now the fourth and probably most important con for retail arbitrage is the fact that there's no security in it. And what I mean by this is retail stores do not provide invoices. And as you may have heard, when selling on Amazon, there are certain scenarios where you're going to need to provide an invoice to be able to sell that product or continue selling that product. And I'm not talking about ungates, we'll come on to that in my next point, but this is more for if you receive an authenticity complaint for the product. Say you sold it and a customer returned it and complained that it was inauthentic, even though it wasn't. Whether it was or not, it doesn't matter because you don't have an invoice, so you can't prove it. Now this is going to bring great risk to your Amazon selling account, and that's just not what you want to be doing. If you have a couple of these and you can't provide any proof that the products you're selling are authentic, Amazon are going to be thinking, what's going on here? This is seeming a bit dodgy, and they can just close your account down, which is of course the last thing you want. Number 5, it's not beginner friendly. When you first start selling on Amazon, you're going to be restricted on a lot of brands and categories. Now this is called being gated. You can get unrestricted on them or ungated, but to do this you need to provide an invoice showing a combined purchase of 10 units for that product you're trying to sell. Now Amazon also have a list of requirements that invoice has to show or it will not get accepted. And unfortunately the retail receipts that these stores provide just won't cut it. Amazon will not accept this, meaning you will not be able to get ungated. And because of this, it's just not very beginner friendly. If you're going to a store and scanning loads of products, you finally find one, but you can't even sell it because you're gated, and even if you were to buy 10 units from that store, it's not going to allow you to get ungated. It's just not really working, it's not making sense. You do have the chance to go ahead and buy those products elsewhere, ungate them, return them, and then sell the products that you originally bought from the retail store, but this just causes complications and just longs out the process. It's also going to depend on the store's return policy. You need to make sure that you're ungating the products and able to sell them before you reach that end of return period, so you don't just get left sat with products that you can't sell and can't ungate. Now the 6th con for retail arbitrage is it's unscalable. Now what do I mean by this? See, it's all well and good you going to the store yourself, scanning these products, seeing what you can find to sell, but there's going to come a point where it just takes up too much of your time and you simply can't find any more products because it's too time consuming. From there, it's going to be very difficult to try and hire someone else who's going to go do that job for you. It's not really heard of. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is going to be a difficult task to outsource to someone else. And because of that, retail arbitrage as a whole is a capped model. You can only really take it so far before you have no more room for growth because you can't physically do more with it. Even if you were to pay a few friends to come down with vans and load stock up, you're only ever going to find so much stock at a retail store anyway because they usually have limited quantities. In some cases, they'll even have basket limits, so you'll only be able to purchase a limited amount of stock. So realistically, when you do reach that capped level, it's going to be very hard to break through. Now the 7th point I actually mentioned in the last one, which is sometimes you're going to be limited on quantity you can purchase. Now there's a few ways around this, like getting your mates to come down and purchase more for you, or coming in later, maybe wearing some different clothes, whatnot. But for the most part, it is a lot of headache and a lot of work just to get a few more units of one item. But the reason this is such a downfall for this method is you could be scanning products for hours, find a great deal, and only be able to purchase 2 units. Now whether that's because of the basket limit, so you're only allowed to purchase that quantity, or there's simply just only 2 left on the store, which can happen very frequently too, it's going to be a case of was it worth scanning products for 2 hours just to pick up 2 units. Now coming on to the final con of retail arbitrage, I did warn you that there was a lot of cons for this one, but this is going to be that there's a lack of long-term products that you can consistently sell and replenish back into your inventory. Now the reason behind this is because you're going to be looking for products in clearance section or on sale, and when these products have been sold out from the clearance sections and the store's been wiped clean of those products, you're not going to be able to get it again. Which means that's a product you could once sell for a profit, but now you just can't. The opportunity is not there anymore. And it's the same with the products that you're finding on sale. When the sale ends, you're probably not going to get it for a profitable price anymore, which means it's no longer a product that you can be selling. So therefore, there's just no longevity in this model, unfortunately. Now, let's talk about online arbitrage. So to start off, we'll mention the pros and then we'll go on to the cons. So firstly, it can be done from anywhere. Because it's all done on your laptop, you can do it anywhere in the world with an internet connection. You don't have to physically go in person store to store, you just scroll through the sites on the internet. Now this method can introduce a level of freedom into your life. Whether you choose to do it from your desk, your bed, a hotel on holiday, it's up to you. Secondly, now this goes for both online and retail arbitrage, so I could have included it in either, it doesn't really make a difference, but the low startup capital. To start selling on Amazon through the arbitrage method, you can start with as little as £400. This is going to cover all the software, supplies, equipment, and your first load of stock. Now, as long as you don't take money out of the business and just keep reinvesting it all, you can obviously grow that into some larger numbers with time. But because arbitrage requires lower startup capital, it means it's more beginner friendly. Now, out of them all, online arbitrage is the least risky method. You don't have to worry about the product not selling like with private label, because you're reading the data to show that it's already performing well. You don't have to invest money into PPC so that it can actually sell. You don't have to buy in large bulk quantities like you do with wholesale, and you do get invoices, unlike retail arbitrage. Now, as for the fourth point, if done correctly, with online arbitrage, you don't have to worry so much about competition, because the reality is they can only ever get the product for the same price that you're getting it. Whereas for wholesale, for example, if they can order in larger quantities than you because they have more capital, that can often get them further discounts so they can sell it cheaper than you and still maintain the same margin, which is easily going to allow them to outcompete you. Yes, of course, if you go into these main suppliers or retailers that everyone knows in the space, then of course the products you buy are more likely to become saturated. If you're thinking outside the box and using more unique strategies, then it is easier to minimize that competition. Another pro for online arbitrage, especially compared to retail arbitrage, is you don't have to spend that money on fuel. Because obviously you're not going to be driving around store to store. You just sit at your desk or wherever you choose and do it all from your laptop. For the sixth point, as I mentioned, for the majority of time you're going to be provided invoices. Now, this alone makes it a much more beginner friendly method as well, because as a beginner you're going to be gated on majority of brands and categories, but purchasing from a supplier that provides these invoices, unlike with retail arbitrage, again, you're going to be having more luck getting ungated. Another great thing with online arbitrage that you don't get from wholesale, private label or retail arbitrage is you get cashback benefits. Now, what this is essentially you spend money on a site, and if you're using a cashback software like TopCashback, which is the one I personally use, it's my favorite and I'm going to link that in the description below for you, you can choose at the checkout to activate this cashback, and every time you spend money you're going to get money back from it. You can see rates from 1 to 20+%, and it's just a nice extra to get back for spending your money. It's a little bonus for your business. Now, the final pro for online arbitrage is it's scalable and outsourceable. Because you don't have to travel to loads of shops, you can do it all from your laptop. That means you can pay someone else to just do it from their laptop. There's a lot less things that you have to put in place, and it's very straightforward. Now, the fact that it's outsourceable means it's scalable to high levels, and that's how I've managed to achieve 90k in sales in just 1 month. Now, as for cons for online arbitrage, there's honestly not too many that I can think of, but the main thing that comes to mind, and it's the biggest issue, is that you're not getting the longevity in your product still. Just like retail arbitrage, most of the products you're going to be buying are going to be in sale, meaning once that sale ends, you're not going to be able to get them again. So you're constantly chasing that next deal. But that being said, as long as you have a good system around your sourcing, it doesn't have to be such an issue because the cash is still flowing in. It's not like you'll ever run out of products to resell. So it's more down to personal preference how you want to run your business specifically, whether it's going to off-put you or not. So the next method for selling on Amazon on our list is wholesale. Now, for the pros, I think this is a very big one. You get to build relationships with suppliers or brands. Now, that leads to opportunity. Say you're speaking with a supplier, you're telling them your wants, your needs inside your business. Whenever they have an opportunity and a product for you that meets your needs, they might reach out to you. Before you even go scanning through their site for more products, they will just drop you a message and let you know that they have this available, and that might be a good buy for you. Of course, this is going to make it more time efficient, and you never know what other opportunities can come from building these relationships with brands or suppliers. The second pro for wholesale is that it's a scalable business. Chances are you're never going to run out of suppliers for wholesale, because even if you lost a few, you can always just call up 100 more, and from that you may get 10 who want to work with you and 1 or 2 that actually have profitable product lines that you can sell on Amazon. So as long as you've got the money coming in, the capital that you're able to invest into the business, you can just keep growing it. The sky is really your limit. The third point is that with wholesale, you do have that longevity for products. You may stock a product line from that brand that continues selling for a year, 2 years, even more. So as long as you have that connection with the brand, you can consistently buy it month in, month out. And that takes me on to my final point for wholesale. You can buy in larger quantities. This goes hand in hand for the longevity of the products, because if you're consistently buying more products, you're going to be wanting to buy in larger quantities so that you can get those further discounts. Any money off is a bonus. Now, for the cons of wholesale, there are usually lower margins compared to the other methods. You gotta think the brands you're working with aren't really going to be wanting to do discounts unless you're buying larger quantities. But even still, they want to get as much money from it as possible, meaning you're not going to be buying in sales as you would with arbitrage, for example. You can't overcharge like you can with private label in some situations, so you usually will be left taking a slightly lower margin, but that's not always the case. Another con is that it's a higher barrier to entry compared to arbitrage. You need more capital to get started because you usually do have to place bigger orders, and you also need a bit more knowledge and experience to start. It's not as straightforward as arbitrage, and it does take some learning. Thirdly, it can be more time consuming from the point that you start looking to when you find that product. This is because you may have to call 100 suppliers like I mentioned and still only get a few profitable items from all those calls. The fourth point for wholesale is that you're often going to be competing with sellers that have more capital than you, have more experience and years in the game than you, and are able to get those same products for a cheaper price than you. Whether that's down to the connections they've built up over the years or the capital they've built up, either way, it's going to be difficult to compete with. Now the last point, which is what put me off wholesale, is having to rely on these suppliers. See, there's certain things that they can put in place that can throw you off as a reseller of their products. For example, they can offer brand exclusivity to another seller. This means you would no longer be able to sell that product, or transparency barcodes they could introduce. Again, that means you're not going to be able to sell the product if you don't have access to those barcodes. Product lines could reach the end of their life. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and realistically, if one supplier brings in even 20% of your total sales, if anything was to go wrong with that supplier and you can no longer stock their products, it's going to be a big hit to your business. Now finally, we have private label. The first pro is it's an extremely scalable business model. This is because if you can get your brand up and running, selling well, you're the only one that's able to sell that product, meaning you can take all of the sales. Now if you scale that up, there's a lot of potential to make a lot of money. Now the second and third point tie into each other, and that's that you're building your own brand, which creates a sellable business. See, if time goes on and you're continuously selling this product, it's bringing in crazy profits every year. With time, eventually, if set up correctly, you could go on to sell that brand and get a big payout for it, which is also another reason why the business model is more scalable. As for the cons, you're going to be competing with large China suppliers who are also selling on Amazon, and that's going to be difficult. Secondly, private label has the highest barrier to entry compared to all of the other models. You need more money to get started, you need more knowledge to get started, and it is just generally a harder business model. Thirdly, it has the most risk involved. You could pay a manufacturer to create these products for you, get them in, send them off to Amazon, pay for your PPC, and they still don't perform. You still don't make those sales. That's just one example. There is a lot more that can go wrong with private labels. So naturally, it's just more of a risky business compared to the rest. There's a lot more to it, and because of that, there's a lot more that can go wrong. And finally, you do need to run ads to get your product selling. Now this means that you could be selling a product for multiple months and still not see any profit from it, because the money that you're generating from those sales is just being put straight back into the PPC ads just to actually have your product continuously selling, which obviously ties back into the point that you do need more money to get started with private label as well. So now that we've listed out the pros and cons for each method, we're going to rank them from worst to best, but also which method suits which level of seller best. And although they're both arbitrage models, again, we're going to split retail and online arbitrage, just for the reference of this video. So the worst model for selling on Amazon goes to retail arbitrage. This is just down to its risks and lack of sustainability, and overall the cons just outweigh the pros. Don't get it twisted, it can be okay if you've been selling for 6 months or onwards, so you already have a good amount of brands and categories ungated. It's something you don't have to worry about now. But you're still probably not at a point of looking to outsource, as your business is still relatively small. But when you reach a 2-year mark, for example, there will simply be much more effective ways to spend your time at this point. And you probably have already or will be looking to delegate the task of sourcing as a whole. And as I mentioned, with RA, you cannot do this. It cannot be outsourced. Next on the list, we have wholesale. Now this is a very controversial opinion. Most people always jump to put wholesale ahead of online arbitrage, but the truth is they probably just haven't fully pushed OA to its limits. So the reason I'd put wholesale in third place is because although it can be a great strategy for selling on Amazon, it does come with a lot of obstacles you must overcome, especially as a new seller. And I'd say that goes for anyone with less than 2 years in the game. To give some examples, most wholesalers don't want to work with Amazon sellers whatsoever. And if you don't have a physical location such as a warehouse, then you don't even have the option to lie in order to get a trade account open, which is what most people have to do. Because as soon as they see your delivery address is a residential address, they'll simply push you to the side and forget about you. They're just not going to want to deal with you. Also, they often don't like to work with non-VAT registered companies. And if you're new to Amazon, of course, you will not have reached this level yet. Most suppliers have minimum order values or quantities, meaning you're going to need more capital to actually even work with them in the first place. You can't simply come and buy 10 units of a product in most cases. And lastly, it requires more knowledge and experience compared to arbitrage. All round, wholesale is a great business model, can produce you good amounts of money, but truthfully, you do need to have a good amount of money and experience in the game already to get started with it and actually see those good results. Now in second best, we have online arbitrage. This has been my main focus for selling on Amazon. It's what I use and teach to my students. And by the way, if you're interested in learning for yourself, then head to the description of this video where you can find a link to my group and then join the source today. Limited spaces are available though. You see, OA is a very underrated method for selling on Amazon. It requires low amounts of startup capital, has less hurdles than wholesale, and can be scaled to just as high levels if done correctly. The way I see it, why would you go into wholesale which has those extra roadblocks and requires more money to start when the two methods can be scaled at the same level? It's just a no-brainer the way I see it. Now in first place, of course, we have private label. Now the reason I've placed this so highly on the list is simply down to its scalability. Considering you can build a whole brand out of it and potentially go on to sell the business if built correctly, the potential is just unmatched compared to the other methods. However, with that comes the largest barrier to entry. You do need a lot of experience and knowledge to start this method. It comes with the most risk, it's arguably the hardest model and is very much not beginner friendly. This model is for experienced sellers only who have at least 10k ready to invest if they want to take it seriously. It's also going to cost you a decent amount of money to learn this method, and that won't be cheap either, as it is very advanced. But the pros can definitely outweigh the cons for this method, just if you're in the right position to make it work. Now I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please drop a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.